Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Sandino Gomez yet again, and I'm doing a little video today about my own personal goals as a teacher. And I've kind of been thinking about this question with the upcoming school year being mostly online. At least the first half of the year, my school district has committed will be online based, so we're going to be doing distance learning. As a teacher in a high school that is almost entirely you know, Latinx student population, there's a couple factors there that I think are going to be really challenging for us teachers. And so I kind of designed my teaching goals this year in two sort of categories. One is more of just me as a teacher in general, and then I should say one category is me as a teacher in general, and then one is more of me specific to this year, my teaching goals for this year that have a lot more to do with like working online and working with students online in a distance learning format. So again, more like general teacher goals and then ones that are more specific to this year. I actually have 6 goals, so 2 categories, 3 in each category. And I'll tell you all about those in just a second. But to kind of set the stage and help you understand a little bit better about these goals and why I have them, there is going to be a little bit of introduction about me and who I am as a critical thinker and as a teacher. So, as I've stated in my previous videos, I'm a community organizer by trade and by kind of training. I've worked in a lot of different nonprofits and volunteer efforts for a long time to help enact what I hope is a more socially just, racially just, environmentally just kind of world order and local community. I think all change really starts at a local basis. So being able to work with people around you to accomplish goals and make things happen, I think is just a huge part of community organizing as well as critical thinking. I stated in my previous video, and I want to repeat here, that in order to change systems of power and systems of oppression, one has to be able to think critically about them. And so that's sort of one of my strengths, I think, is I've always been a bit of a critical thinker even before I knew what that term meant, because I'm always reflecting on my place in a particular environment. There's been a large part of my life where I didn't feel like I particularly belonged, and so as a result, I would reflect like, why don't I belong here? What is this situation? Why is it like that? And I think that's helped me grow as a person and helped me adapt to be successful in a lot of different environments. So again, critical thinking, it's just definitely an essential skill. It's even more essential if you're going to be working in a classroom. And as a history teacher, I think critical thinking is going to be super important for my students as well, because one of my goals as a teacher is not just to teach U.S. history, American government economics. Those are the 2 classes I'll be teaching this year, but also to help my students learn how to think critically about the world around them and learn how the history of the past helped make the world today. So by understanding and contextualizing the past, I think I'm going to be better able to help my students understand and even shape the future and the present world around them. So I think those skills kind of go hand in hand, and it's something I'm going to work really hard on this year. So, and I think a big key to that is also just like relationships and building relationships with your students. I have really enjoyed reading both the articles that were assigned, and I've dabbled in the book Pedagogy of the Oppressed long time ago when I was more of a community organizer. But I really appreciate Paulo Freire's different theories, and in particular, the problem posing theory versus the sort of banking theory of education and teaching. I think that's a huge inspiration to me. I think I have to contextualize what I'm teaching my students and make it relevant to their world today, or it's just not going to stick as well as it could. And by contextualizing and connecting the information we're learning about to my students' lives, I think that will help teach them critical thinking as well. So the 2 goals kind of go hand in hand. So yeah, that being said, me as a critical thinker, me as a teacher, let's launch right into the goals. These are the sort of the more general teacher goals right here. And so the first one I have is, I want to work to design and implement both a chronological and thematic curriculum, a series of units that I'll be able to use to teach U.S. history. I read an interesting article while doing some of my research about is a chronological method of teaching history better than a thematic one? There were arguments for and against each method, but I think the interesting one for me was doing a blended one. So I'm going to kind of try and blend different eras in American history with different themes around American history. So, looking at the Civil War and like the abolition movement and Reconstruction and connecting that to like Black Lives Matter and the sort of demand for police accountability today, making connections between those types of topics I think are going to be huge. So I want to be able to have like themes within my chronological history. Last year I started, as the standard state I should, in the Civil War era, kind of the founding of America, very, very briefly. I honestly think we don't teach enough about that particular aspect, but that's a whole nother video. So briefly covering sort of America from conception up until the Civil War, and then launching into the Civil War and Reconstruction and the Industrial Age, and looking at all these different aspects of American history. I'd really like to try and connect those themes with the chronological history of events. So it's not just a bunch of dates and events, but it's also like, oh, the theme of Reconstruction was like, how do we build a better world for America and African Americans in particular, and then I think that can connect to today because their social media feeds are filled up. A lot of them are with messages around Black Lives Matter and police accountability, and a lot of the work that community organizers are doing right now to create a better nation and a better set of race and race relations for our peoples. And as a way of doing that, like as I'm teaching these thematic ones, my second teacher goal is to ask my students more questions instead of just giving them answers. Kind of using the Socratic method to get my students to think critically about what they're saying and why they came up with a particular answer. So sometimes that means doing more of like a fact check and like asking students like for an answer that has, or asking my students a question that has an answer that's more right or wrong. It's not so opinionated. And then asking them, well, why do you think that answer? What reading did you have? What video did you watch? What was it that made you think this is the correct answer to my question? So helping them think about how they got to their answers. And then also at the same time doing the same thing with more of opinionated statements. When I ask them, well, what do you think about this and this and that? What do you think about this piece of legislation that was passed in the past? Like, give me your opinion. Now, why do you think that opinion? So I'm asking them to connect their thinking and their answers with what we've learned and their own ability to critically think. That's another goal of mine. So just continually asking students questions. Why? That's the key question. Why do you think that? Why is that your opinion? Why is that your answer? Et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, as a regular goal, teaching goal of mine, I want to really regularly solicit feedback from my students and from my colleagues as well. I really enjoy the reflection process and thinking about what I'm teaching and how I'm teaching it, and getting direct feedback. Like, I think, I have no problem with constructive criticism. I am well aware, despite what my own brain thinks, of my own imperfections. And, the fact that a lot of what I could do could always be better if I had spent more time planning or preparing for whatever I'm teaching. It can always be better. So thinking about how can I find the strengths and make those better? How can I address the weaknesses or the needs? And what can I do differently next time? I found that my students' feedback last year was invaluable to help me think differently about my own teaching praxis and how I approach these topics with my students. So soliciting feedback from my students, but also from my colleagues when possible, particularly in the social studies department, asking other teachers, well, how did that work for you when you did it? Or, will you come in and observe my class and give me some feedback about this lesson? I think there's a lot to learn from each other. I really appreciate the peer learning process, and it's kind of one of my other goals is to embrace that more. So specific goals, I have 3 that are more about the coming school year with distance learning and the challenges that that's going to present. I want to assemble a list of icebreakers and get to know you assignments that can work both in person and in an online format, or one or the other. I want to assemble lists of both because I think, again, getting to know my students, who they are, what their needs are, what their strengths are. That's going to be a huge part of being able to teach them effectively. And that's going to be a particular challenge starting the school year, because I'm not going to have the same understanding that I did last year of who my students are. I'll have a vague assumptions because of my student population in my school and what my students were like last year, but that's not necessarily going to mean that's who my students are this year. So working on that ability of mine to learn more about my students is going to be important and crucial, and I just want to make that a fun process. They'll probably do a couple assignments, but I also want to be able to do some games and some other kinds of things that will help me learn more about who my students are and what they're all about and what their interests are, and et cetera, et cetera. So icebreakers, get to know you assignments, that's one goal. Come up with a bunch of those. I want to create systems of delivering lessons and assignments online that are more efficient and easily organized for myself. So, I'm going to be using Google Classroom this year, and we have a student information system called Synergy. Synergy can sync to Google Classroom. I didn't do that last year, and I thought I was saving myself some time, but it really turned into a bigger project than it should have been, transferring data from those two systems. So if I had started right from the beginning doing that, it would not have been as hard. So investing some time now can save me a bunch of time later. I need to think of other ways to create systems to make my work more efficient as well. So I've been thinking a lot about the National University model and how they deliver content and how they, have been teaching me to be a teacher. And I want to model some of my classroom praxis after what I've learned through National, because most of this program has been taught via distance learning, and that's been a super interesting process for me. I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to learn from National how to do distance learning as I prepared to do distance learning. So very cool and relevant that was like together. And finally, for my last teacher goal, 6 that we've had so far, I want to seek out innovative and creative online teaching techniques for my students. Things like, if you look up the game Spent is a super cool simulation where they've created a game to see if you can get through the month on your paycheck, basically. It's designed to teach about working poverty, and we did it last year in my economics class with my senior students, and that was reported as one of their favorite things from that semester, was playing the game Spent, learning about a budget and how to stretch money, learning about the different kinds of things that students will be expected to pay for as they move into adulthood. That simulation is awesome. For any economics teachers out there, look up the game Spent, and it helps your students and yourself understand sort of working poverty and working people and working class issues. So, for my history class, one of the things we did last year that was actually super fun for my students as well, according to the feedback I got from them, was the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail was actually designed as a game to teach U.S. history to students, so it wouldn't just be, read this out of the textbook and understand history. By putting my students into that gamified situation of trying to arrive safely with their family members from, the East Coast to the West Coast, that simulation helped them better understand the larger narrative of American history, and it was fun for them to play. So I'm really looking for those things that are going to be fun, innovative, creative, special for them to do in an online environment, because that's what we're going to be doing this year. And I don't want to just be talking out the screen at them. And I really hope that we can find a way to do more things that they'll enjoy. Bottom line is that things that they'll enjoy. If I can trick them into enjoying the educational process, hopefully some of that knowledge will stick in here, because it was fun for them. And I think that's another key part of teaching, and goes into one of my strengths. The last thing we're supposed to do in this video is to talk about our strengths and our needs as teachers. And I think one of my strengths is sort of the environment I'm able to create in my classroom to help students prepare for a learning process. I lay out some agreements where I'm talking about like no bullying. The world's going to tear us down enough. In my classroom, can we build each other up instead? Doing agreements in class that we won't, use racist or sexist or homophobic or ableist, classist kind of languages, or, kind of ways of relating to each other. Creating that environment where risks can be taken, where critical thinking can happen, where people aren't going to be mocked for thinking critically about what's going on around them. That's all like super crucial to me, and I think it worked really well to create an environment where all students felt like they had something to contribute, and by contributing, they're also learning, they're participating in their own education. A lot of my students really have trouble speaking up in class. There's like this social stigma against being too smart or too dumb. So it's best to just not talk at all, because then you can't be labeled either one of those things. And that's a shame, because a lot of these students have a lot to contribute. But if they don't feel safe to do so in my classroom, it's never going to happen. So that's one of the things that I think I'm good at, is sort of creating that environment where learning is safe and fun and good. I'm really good. Also, the second strength I have is like sort of adapting my plans and thinking on my feet. I was a big drama nerd in high school, no surprise. And I always loved improv. So, having a plan, having a lesson ready, but then also looking like, oh, is this working? Is this not? Do I need to shift gears? Do I need to change this? And doing that between classes as well really helped me last year. I told my second period class, sorry, y'all are the guinea pigs. I had first period prep, so second period was the first period I taught. And I was just like, I'm trying out every lesson for the first time on you guys. And then sixth period, they're going to get the benefits of all the tweaks that I do from second through sixth periods, various deliveries. So, tweaking the plan, adapting, making it better on my feet as I go. That's always been one of my strengths. And finally, my kind of cultural and community competency. As a Latino male who grew up in Santa Cruz County, I understand a lot of the struggles that my students are going through. We may live on different sides of the county, but a lot of the challenges that they face, why I might not have faced them myself, I'm familiar with them, and I'm familiar with the community that they come from and the challenges that are there. So I think my cultural competency and my knowledge of the community as a community organizer, as someone who's worked in schools for years through arts programs and nonprofits, I have that ability to kind of understand my community well, and to take that knowledge and implement it as I'm working with the students from that community. So those are my strengths, my ability to create an environment, my ability to adapt, my knowledge of the community. Those are my three strengths I've identified. And as far as my needs go, I'm not always the most organized. First year was survival mode. It's like, what am I doing today? I don't know. And, I'd try and lay out week plans, but they never seemed to keep up with the flow of class. And there was always something else to do. So keeping more organized, that's why one of the goals I had around Synergy and Google Classroom, just being more organized in ways to deliver content online, is going to be super crucial this year. So I know that's something I have to work on, one of my needs. And, I think I was good at teaching critical thinking, asking why, that whole goal. But I think there is going to be the need to identify a way to do that online. It's not going to happen the same way in a Zoom meetup as it will in in-person classroom. There's a spontaneity that's going to be lost between this screen and me and you. And we're not going to have the same interactions that we would if we were in person, no matter how hard I try or how awesome I make my videos. It's just the kind of discussion where critical thinking and ideas gets bounced off different students, and someone says something that makes this guy think of this, and then that girl's like, oh yeah, I get it now. Like, that's not going to be able to happen the same way. So I need to think about, how am I going to try to teach critical thinking when it comes to U.S. history and government economics, again, in an online format. That's just something I've never done, and something I'm going to really push myself to do well this year. And finally, I need to design everything better. I'm still, about to begin my second year of teaching. Like, I don't have everything laid out. I don't have my way of doing things. I did it the first time last year, and there's some things that went really well, and I'd do it again, and some things that I would not do again. And so I need to think about, designing those thematic and chronological curriculums for my history class, and designing those thematic units for my government economics classes. I still have to rebuild and adapt what I did last year to this new online format. And in a way, I'm grateful that I'm not set in my ways, because it is going to be easy for me to adapt to the challenge. It's going to be harder for teachers that already have their whole year lesson planned out. And that's just what I do every year. Like, how do you now adapt that to online? That's a challenge. at least you're starting with something. You're starting with your materials, you're starting with your lessons and your plans. But is it all going to work online? Like, there's a lot of teachers that are way old school, and they have pens and papers and journals that the students write in every day. How's that going to work online? You know, do you get a Google Doc? Do you not do it? Who knows? There's ways to face these challenges, and whether you're a new teacher like myself, or whether you're one of the veteranos that have been there forever, we're all going to struggle with adapting to online learning. So I know that, and I know I need to design my curriculum and units to do that. It's going to be huge. So anyway, sorry to take all your time. This is 20 minutes already, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative, and thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you have a great day, and a good luck with your teaching wherever you may be.